The Public Enterprises Minister Lynne has acknowledged that the balance sheets of state-owned enterprises will be negatively affected after asset manager Futuregrowth said it would stop lending funds. Also, the Danish Bank, Jyske Bank, is the second financial institution to make such an announcement to stop funding state-owned enterprises. These include Eskom, SAA, Transnet, the Land Bank, SANRAL, the IDC and the Development Bank of Southern Africa. Let's just find out what this means for us and let's get a little bit more of an understanding. Tshepo Kgadima is in studio with us. He's a political analyst. Good to have you. Thank you so much for joining us here on the program.
Thank you. Good to be here.
I mean, in layman's terms, so we hear something like this, these institutions want to stop funding our SOEs. What does it actually mean?
Yeah, maybe I'd like to first preface it this way, Lynne, that I think what we need in South Africa now is to really move away from enjoying the comfort of opinion. There's a lot of opinion out there, but we need really to go to a level whereby we endure the discomfort of thought, to really think through the problems that are facing our country. Now, if we take into account the announcement that was made 2 days ago by one of the leading money managers in the country in Futuregrowth that they're not going to be lending to these SOEs, that certainly was a not well thought out decision, because the moment that it was announced and made public, it triggered an avalanche. And I believe that that was the first installment of what probably would have been many that would follow. And when you look at it really, what triggered it, it wasn't really based on the fundamentals. These state-owned companies that they've said that they're no longer going to be lending any money to, and including the Danish Bank that followed yesterday, when you look at it, the fundamentals are solid. 2 days ago, we saw a very good story coming out of Eskom in terms that it is cash positive. It's had savings from operations of over 18.5 billion rand, 5 billion rand above budget. So that's certainly something that should have been celebrated. And also, when you look at the ability for these state-owned companies to generate positive cash flows, that certainly is something that we should really be looking at as a positive in our economy. Because what I believe strongly that we need to do, we need to move away from what is known as the Washington consensus, and some would say neoliberalist economic policies. Which is what? Free markets, less regulation or no regulation at all, privatization. But when you look at where our economy is and the structure of our economy, certainly that is not the route that we should be taking. We need to move away from that. We need to have a more interventionist approach by the state. And there are a number of examples of other leading economies, developing and developed economies, whereby when they went that direction, they've been able to really achieve phenomenal economic growth. The other thing that worries me is that there is lack of clarity as far as policy is concerned. Take, for example, what Minister Lynne said, that the decision and the announcement by Futuregrowth will negatively affect the balance sheet of the state-owned companies. We as I think as a country, and particularly in the state-owned company arena, there needs to be a shift from the balance sheet focused approach to a growth focused approach towards this. And what do I mean by that?
There's so much I need to get from you, because hang on a second, we could talk about this the whole time, but I need to talk about a lot of other issues and very quickly. I mean, Eskom. Here's a big problem. We've got Eskom together, the relationship between the two of them, statements coming out from every direction you look at the moment. And I mean, just give us again an understanding of, interference in state institutions, this particular deal, Eskom and Together. What are your views on this? Yeah,
my views are this. If I look at just over a year ago, 18 months ago, there was a war room established. That's certainly one of the strongest critics of the war room. At the time, I went public to say that it was not, because it was outside of the company structure. However, when we look at what happened from May last year, with new management coming on board led by Brian Molefe and the chairman, Dr. Ben Nkubani, what we are seeing now, we are seeing a different picture from what the company was a year ago. So what I'm believing we should be doing, the responsible thing to do by many of us who are outsiders, is to really stop second guessing the decision-making ability of these executives. Because if anything, the numbers that they shared with the public when they were doing their briefing in Parliament just 2 days ago certainly should give all of us a cold comfort. But above all, there is no need for propaganda in terms of the stability and the improved operational efficiencies at Eskom. Well, the light switch at home is the one that gives you that assurance that indeed everything else is working. We have moved away from load shedding, and we should celebrate that.
Okay, so you're comfortable with Eskom, you're comfortable, we spoke off air, you're comfortable with SAA, that's another company. But I want to talk about, just finally and wrapping it up, the war between Treasury and the Hawks. What is going on here?
It shouldn't be the war between Treasury and the Hawks. I think the Hawks, this really deals with the fundamental principle, which is that the rule of law. And the rule of law needs to be seen to be applied. But the current arena where we've now moved into, whereby there seems to be this spat between National Treasury and the Hawks, certainly it is not helpful. But as a country, we have to remember that should this matter not be handled in a manner that does not reinforce the rule of law, most certainly as a country, we're going to suffer the consequences. Because in the event that we handled it any more differently without maintaining the conscripts of the rule of law, it means, well, what else tomorrow are you going to be deviating from? I think the Hawks needs to be doing their work without fear, favor, or prejudice. Because prejudice or sometimes is left out. Do not prejudice the rights of any other, because all citizens are equal before the law, protected by the Constitution. But at the same time, I feel that Treasury needs to mute the call for sympathy, as some have said it, and not really be more in the public to do the work that they need to do. And I believe Treasury, led by Minister Pravin Gordhan, what they need to really be focusing on is ensuring that economic policy, fiscal policy, those are the issues that they must be focusing on. And more so, I think a number of things. We need to have a balanced budget. The theory of deficit financing is certainly not good for our country. We will soon move to the same situation as the United States, with a $15 trillion economy, GDP, and a $17 trillion debt. And when Donald Trump comes in, and I think he's going to come in, they're going to be increasing their debt levels to $19 trillion. That is certainly not healthy, even in our case, whereby 50% of our GDP now is in sovereign debt. We need to move away from that. We need to move to a balanced budget. That means we need to reform our tax code to ensure that we can be more efficient in collecting taxes. Many have spoken about the illicit outflows. We haven't yet legislated. We haven't put in place legislative mechanisms to ensure that we can arrest that once and for all, which is forecast to be over 130 billion rand or so that we are losing every year. So if we can reform our tax code and ensure that it is in line, we can be more efficient in collecting taxes, we can then fund the much more needed development of this economy, particularly economic infrastructure. It is important to note this.
We need to leave it there, Tshepo. We have to leave it. We've got no time, unfortunately. But I think before we initiate any of those things, we need to get to the bottom of what's happening in Treasury at the moment, and this so-called war between the Hawks and the Treasury. Tshepo, thank you for talking to us. Tshepo Kgadima is a political analyst, just giving us his views here on the program. Quick break. News